Good morning. My name is Carrie. Welcome to Wandering Angel Studio, and today we're going to make banner clusters. What's a banner cluster? It's just a series of stacked banners that we cut, and in this case, I ink them up. Before we get into the process of making these, I'd encourage you to both like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, be sure to click the notification bell because there are going to be a lot of videos coming up very shortly and you don't want to miss any. Okay, so what do I use my banner clusters for? Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, I like to use them in my art journals. This is a paper bag art journal, and I'm actually going to be teaching you how to make this. Okay. The other thing I like to do is I love to use these on card fronts. They make great card fronts, very decorative. In the case of this card, all you have to do is add a sentiment and you're ready to go. Last but not least, I'm also going to show you how to make these. Now, these are banner clusters. The only difference is they're on both sides. So you can decorate them the same on both sides, or you can decorate them differently on both sides. These actually have hidden paper clips in them. Let me see if I can get this one up here. There we go. Okay, these actually have hidden paper clips in them. Not sure if the camera's going to get that, but they have little hidden paper clips in them that you can use to clip them onto things. These make great art journal editions. They also work really well as bookmarks, so if you have friends who are book people, these make great little gifts for them. Okay, so let's move our goodies out of the way here and let's get started. Now, the first thing you're going to need, obviously, is going to be a pair of scissors. I like my Tim Holtz scissors here. Let's move these down into frame so you can see them. I love these. They have a titanium coating, and they're just marvelous. So we're going to be using those today. We're also going to be using all Tim Holtz papers. Well, not all Tim Holtz papers. We're going to be using some solid cardstock as well as some of my own tea-dyed paper to kind of counterbalance. But most of what I have here is Tim Holtz paper from the Memoranda paper pack. This paper is really heavy. I think it's 110-pound cardstock, and it's great for this kind of thing. It builds nice, sturdy little banner clusters for your book. So as you can see here, I have a bunch of different types of paper, or different patterns of paper, I should say, as well as some solid card stock to mix in with that. Okay, last thing you're going to need is you're going to need some form of adhesive. I absolutely adore my tape gun. It's a fabulous thing to use, but you can use anything you want. You can use tacky glue. A lot of people like the art glitter glue. You can use that as well. Whatever adhesive you have on hand. Okay, since this is heavier cardstock, the plain cardstock is anywhere between 60 and 80 pound. The Tim Holtz paper is closer to 90 or 110 pound. Then you can use your wetter adhesives and they'll work just fine, but I love my tape gun, so I'm going to be using that today. Let me move that out of the way. And last but not least, I'm going to be using a paper trimmer. This is the Tim Holtz paper trimmer made by Tonic Studios. Now, if you don't have a paper trimmer, that's okay. You don't absolutely have to have one for this project. It just makes things a lot easier. All right. Okay, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a base. Now, you're going to be asking a lot of questions. The main one is going to be, Carrie, how big do I cut these? That's up to you. It's really that simple, and I'm going to show you how I put one together, and then I'm going to cut the little wedges in it and ink it up for you, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm kind of doing this off camera, I think. I don't think it's going to show you when I cut it. Let's see if I can't move this over here so you can see. So I'm just taking a piece that's maybe a couple of 3 inches, and again, no measuring allowed, ladies. No measuring allowed, ladies and gentlemen. No measuring allowed. Okay, just cutting that off there. There we go. Now you can see what I'm doing. Okay, I'm gonna reach over here into my pile of scraps, and I'm gonna find something I think is gonna work. Yeah, that'll work kind of nice. And we're gonna need some other pieces, so let's see. Yep, kind of like that. And always check the backs of the pieces too, because that's gonna have some bearing on which side you use, especially if you're using the Tim Holtz paper, because his papers are so interesting that you may want to use one side over another. Okay. All right, I think I'm going to trim this piece of brown cardstock down just a little bit. And again, you're not measuring, so you know you may have this process. Straighten it up, Carrie. There you go. You may have a process whereby you know you just kind of play around with it, but what ends up happening is you end up having more scraps to use on the banner itself. And that's another thing to be aware of. This is a great way to use up those scraps that you have laying around, especially of your more expensive papers, because let's face it, paper, especially now, is not cheap. Decorator paper is very expensive. At least it is to me. And so I like to use as much as I possibly can. I'm going to add one more piece in here. I think I'm going to add a sliver of this tea-dyed paper in there. And how my process works, let me put my trimmer over here, is I usually lay out the rectangles first. They don't have to be rectangles. They can be squares. They can be whatever you choose. Okay, so I lay them out first and I kind of get an idea of where I want things. For example, that piece needs to be a little bit shorter, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. I'll probably leave my trimmer a little bit off camera, but that's okay. All right, so I've got my other two pieces here. Now, I think I've got something that I kind of sort of like. So, and it looks a little busy, but once I get it inked, it won't be as busy as you think it may be, okay? So let's go ahead and notch these. Again, no measuring. Don't make it any more complicated than it absolutely has to be. A lot of you are going to say, well, I don't know if I can cut it to the center like that. It doesn't have to be in the center. I'm perfectly content with it being off center. In fact, more often than not, mine are. Now, don't throw this away. And I'm going to show you why in just a few minutes. You'll see there's a method to my madness, okay? And again, these can be cut at any angle you want. Doesn't matter. If you want to cut some deeper and some shallow, that's okay. I tend to cut the smaller, the thin ones, I should say, not the smaller ones, the thinner ones, deeper. See, already we're shaping up. We've got us a stack tag. We'll cut this piece kind of shallow. And again, I'm not measuring a thing here. If you want to measure them and that works for you, go for it. I just am lazy like that. I don't like to measure, so I'm just cutting them, eyeballing them, and cutting them. Okay, there we go. Oh, that's looking good so far. All right, last but not least. And what I'm probably going to do is move these around a little bit. I almost always end up moving them around to kind of get a good idea of how I want to arrange them. Like this one will probably go over here a little bit, at which point I can move this one over here, and then we'll move these back and forth. So you'll see as it comes together exactly what I mean by that, okay? All right. Now, for this particular project, I'm using Ranger's ink and Vintage Photo. This is Tim Holtz Distress ink. You don't have to use this ink. You can use any ink you want. I have a chalk ink here that's by, I believe it's called Color Block or Color Box chalk ink. I don't even think these are available anymore. I think they've been discontinued like ages ago. But this is my very favorite, and this is actually my last one. So when the foam pad on this one starts going, I'm kind of out of luck there. But I also use this. I also like to use the walnut stain. That's got a little bit more gray in it than what I want for this project on this particular day, but that's an option for me. And it's also really good to use with darker papers, just so you know. Okay, so let's get busy and let's ink our edges here. Yes, this is one of the old-fashioned square inkers, or square ink pads, I should say. I use this mainly because I do a lot of inking over larger areas on some of my larger projects. And so it's just convenient for me if I'm doing an edge, for example, and I'll give you a real quick example of why it makes a difference. Okay. Now see here how I accidentally got ink over there? Not a problem, because we're going to be covering all that up. But even if we weren't covering that up, that just adds to the texture of the thing. And you don't want a lot of ink on these. But anyway, to give you an example of inking an edge, a lot of times when I do that, I just very lightly will ink the edge. Even though it looks like my pad is all the way down on the page, it's not actually. It's just kind of on the edge. And I'm just working my way in to ink the edges and put a little bit more ink on those. And that's generally how I do a project. So I hope that was in frame. Here we go. Okay, and we're gonna ink up the next piece. And this is the time consuming part of it, is inking all the edges. Once you get the edges inked, then you're pretty much good to go and you can start gluing everything down. By the way, I actually have a process that I use so I can make these things en masse. What I usually do is I cut out all my triangles and I sort those and stack them the way you saw me do a few minutes ago. And then I start cutting all my notches into the bottoms of my little banners. So I might actually put together, say, 10 different stacks of these banner clusters, and then cut all the little notches in them at one time, and then ink them all at one time, and then glue them down all at one time. And it doesn't necessarily save you any time to do that, but it just makes me feel like I'm accomplishing more as I go along. Okay, one more piece. I'm going to use this side. My ink pad is not as juicy as it used to be. I keep re-inking it, and it must have been really dry because it's not nearly as juicy as I would like for it to be. So I just will continue to re-ink it over the course of a few days until it's every bit as grubby as I like for it to be. Okay, there we go. Oh, wait a minute. Almost forgot. We're going to ink this too. Okay. And again, I'll show you what we're going to do with it in just a minute. Okay, there we go. Let's get the ink out of the way, and the scissors, and the little doodads left over. I'm going to use my tape gun, and I hope you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, that's our base. Just taking my tape gun and running the tape over it. All right. I like to do, on these larger pieces, I like to do those points so I can make sure that they stay where they want to go. Now, where to put this on the base? The answer is anywhere you want. It's entirely up to you. That's the great thing about these. No measuring, no precise cutting. You just put it where you want it. What I usually do is I usually try and line up one side of the banner that's going on top of to the side, whichever side I'm using, or if it's in the middle, I try and get it equal on both sides to the banner that's underneath. Okay, so that kind of helps me position both pieces and see where I'm going with that. All right, next biggest piece. And again, you can put bigger pieces over small pieces. You can put skinny pieces over top of short pieces. You can even, I have some where, for example, the pieces are hanging off the end here. And the other thing you're going to notice too is that these banners weren't cut evenly. That's okay. I'm perfectly fine with imperfection. And that's what makes this project so great for most folks, is that you don't need perfection. The other thing I'll do is I'll also turn it up here and kind of line it up. Because I cut these on my paper trimmer, that's the other great thing about a paper trimmer. You can use a ruler and scissors, but the great thing about a paper trimmer is if you're laying the paper down precisely, then you're going to get a nice even cut all the way around. And what I'm doing by rubbing these edges is I'm actually rubbing the excess glue that's on here off that's another advantage of using this tape gun, is that you can actually, if you put tape down, and I'll just use a little example. I'm not sure if you can see that here, but I'll bring it up a little bit closer to the camera. There's glue tape right there. All you have to do is roll it with your finger. It's kind of like rubber cement, if you're old enough to remember using rubber cement in school, and it just rubs right off into a little, pardon the expression, booger, and then it comes completely off. So it's not like a liquid adhesive where you have to worry about it seeping and then you worry about it being tacky later on. That's not the issue with the tape gun, and that's one of the reasons why I like using it so much. That, and for me, it's just so much more cost effective, especially when I'm working on books or working in my art journal where I'm putting a lot of things down. Now, if it's something that requires a little bit heavier tack, then I'll use my tacky glue. But for the most part, I use the tape runner. So here we go. Again, I'm not centering these. These are off center of the first couple of banners. Even this largest piece here is off center from the original banner. And that's how I want it. I want some variety. I want you to be able to see all of those points. And here's the last banner piece. And again, if you don't have a tape gun, just use any old adhesive. That will work. I'm going to lay this on top of the first one. And there you go. Again, you can see all those points. For me, that's the important part, is being able to see all those points. Now, you're probably thinking, Carrie, what are you going to do with this piece? Well, let's put some glue on it and find out. Again, I'm going to glue over the little points. I'm not worried about getting glue on the little points because I want to make sure this sticks down. This might be one of those times where you'd use liquid glue. Again, I'm lazy when it comes to using liquid glue. I got to put some more tape on there. There we go. I don't like waiting for it to dry, so I just use it this way. Okay, we're going to put it on top. Make sure the point is even with the very corner of the banner. And then just line it up with the top, and there you go. And to me, that really helps seal the banner off, kind of. It just makes it look finished to me. Do I do this to every one of them? No, I don't. And oh, by the way, before we do another one, I just want to let you know, this is not a new idea. This particular banner idea has been done on several channels, and I will link those channels in the description, so be sure that you check the description out. Okay, that's one made. Now the next one we're going to do involves a paper clip. So this is where things get interesting. What I have here is I have a piece of folded paper. And again, it's rough cut. You see, that's not perfect, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be because you won't see this. Put a paper clip. I'm funny, so I like it in the middle. There we go. Okay. Then I'm going to take a larger piece of paper here. Let's take a piece of this lovely blue. And I'm going to cut it on my paper trimmer. I haven't quite decided how long I want it. Probably a couple of inches on each side, or well, this is actually, let's see. This is about 2.5 inches, so I'll make this one, let's pop out the little bar, and I'll make this a big one. There's a bar back here that tucks into the back of this thing, and it plugs in right there, and then you flip the little leg up, and you can do all the way out to 12-inch paper. Yet another reason why I just love this thing. Okay, so since that's about 3.5 inches, and we're going to cut a point, I'm going to cut this piece of paper 9 inches. Okay. Take this off, put it back under here. There you go. It's tucked away nicely. And I'm actually going to score this. It's just easier for me to score it. Okay, so we've got a 9-inch piece of paper, as you can see. And I'm going to score it at the 4.5-inch mark. I'm going to score it right here a couple of times. There we go. Now, when you're scoring, if you'll notice, there's a little divot here, and if you flip it over, there's a little, what we call a mountain in paper folding. This is what you fold into. So this will actually be the inside of our banner cluster. So I'm gonna fold it over, put my bone folder up a little bit too soon there. Okay. Now that's done. This will be the only one that I actually fold over. The rest of the pieces of paper will be individual pieces. Let me show you what I mean by that. I did this a couple of different ways and finally found a way that worked for me that actually made it look really nice. If I can lay my hands on that little, here it is. Oh, wrong one. Here it is. Wrong one. Okay, I got it now. I promise. All right. If you'll notice, this is folded right in here, but the rest of the pieces of paper are laid on each side over top of it. And I did that for two reasons. The first reason being, it's easier to get the paper clip in here if you just nudge it up against this fold. The other reason why I did it is because then you don't have to make both sides the same. So, you know, you might be tempted, for example, to cut several long pieces of paper and loop them over. Well, that just adds to the bulk up top here. And doing it this way actually reduces the bulk. And again, that way you can also use different papers. Now, I use the same paper on both sides, but you don't have to. Entirely up to you. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut my little divot in here. And the reason why I'm doing it now is because I'm doing both pieces at the same time. So I'm doing the back and the front at the same time. Again, I just look at it, I cut from the corner. I don't worry a whole lot about whether or not it's even, because we're going to add so many pieces to the top of this. It doesn't matter. Does it matter if it's a little bit off center? No, because it's going to be looped over a page like that. So you're not going to see the other side of it anyway. It doesn't make any difference. And I'm all about saving time, you know, making an effort to do that. Okay. Now, the easiest way to do this when you're making one that has a hidden paper clip in it is to go ahead and ink it first. Just because once we put the paper clip inside, and you'll see shortly what I mean by that. It's going to be a little bit harder to ink on both sides and get it just the way you want it, especially when you're inking these points. And again, sometimes I'm heavy-handed with the ink. Does it matter? Nope. This is mine. You can be perfect if you want, if that's your thing. I used to be a massive perfectionist until I had an instructor. It was actually a substitute instructor in my photography class. And when I started asking him questions, he realized right away that I was a little bit of a perfectionist. Okay, I was a lot of a perfectionist. And he's like, oh, you're one of those. And then he proceeded to tell me a story about Dennis the Menace, which I do not remember, by the way. But his point was that nothing has to be perfect. And he's absolutely right. Okay, here you go. And again, I've accidentally bumped the edge with this ink pad. That's okay. It's okay by me. I'm not worried about it. Okay. And if you'll notice, I have those two pieces of paper that I cut off, the little chevron shaped pieces of paper. You can use those on the top or not. Once I've composed the banner portion of this, then I'll decide whether or not I'm going to use them. I don't always use them every time, but the option's there. Okay. Let's open this up. And what we're going to do is we're going to take glue and we're going to put it on one side of this. So for this, I'm using my tacky glue. You can use the tape gun. I've found that it doesn't hold as well. And you know, when you've got something that you're going to be pulling off a page like this, you really want to make absolutely sure that it's going to stick. Okay. I even put some over top of the clip itself. because this part of the clip is not going to be, the clip itself is not what we're going to be using here, and you'll see what I mean by in a minute. Okay, kind of eyeball it in terms of centering it. Okay, get it a little bit down from that crease so that it folds over. Okay, that's fine. Now I'm going to burnish this down just with my fingers, and now I'm going to ink this side. Glue this side. Got my head in the clouds today, folks. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Put a generous portion of tacky glue on there because, again, we want this to hold really well. Okay, burnish that down with my hands, flip it over, burnish it down again. Now, what happens here, I'll open this up real quick so you can see it, is, and of course the glue is not dry yet, so that's why that piece is coming up. What actually ends up happening here is the paper clip is actually on the outside of this piece here. And that's the other thing that you want to do, and the reason why I opened it up is I wanted to absolutely make sure that there was no glue kind of hanging out on the inside so the thing wasn't glued together. But you see how the paper clip is hidden up in there? But if you want to clip something onto it, all you do is slide it on, because what you're actually doing is you're actually sliding it in between those two pieces of paper right there. Okay, so your clip is completely hidden. Nobody can see that. Okay, now let's cut some paper for the outside. I've got some really cute papers here. Some very busy papers, but some really cute papers. Let's see what I got. Oh, here we go. That'll be really nice. So I'm not really sure how wide this is. Let's check real quick. This will pretty much be off camera. So it's a little over 3 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this piece of paper at about 2.5. Move our ink out of the way. At about 2.5. That's good. Okay, let's see. Yep, I like that. And again, I'm not laying it centered because I don't want it centered. So that's about 3 inches. Let's see if that works. You get to the point where you can kind of eyeball it. Okay, that's a little bit shorter than I wanted, but I still have another piece of paper. So I'm going to trim this up. Again, about 3 inches. I'm going to cut it about 3.5 this time. Let's see if that's, yeah, that's good. Because time I cut that little notch into it, it will still leave some of the blue exposed. In fact, actually, let's trim that a little bit more. Let's trim that to 2.5. I forgot I trimmed the first piece to 2.5. There we go. Okay. Now we can start in with the rest of our layers. And again, it's whatever you choose. You be the judge here. You pick. Oh, I like that. That's kind of cool. Okay, so I'm going to cut her out there. Cut her out at about 2 inches. Yeah, kind of like her there. In fact, I think I'm going to leave it that width because what I'm going to do is move this one over. So I'm going to leave it that width, and I actually think that I'm going to bring this down to about here. So I'm going to cut it about 4.5 inches, give or take. Now, I'm kind of sort of measuring. You don't have to measure. Just take my word for it. You don't have to measure. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. Alrighty. I want one more piece, a skinny piece in here. Let's see. Oh, not the green. Let's see. I've got a ton of pieces here that I can use. That's a little close in color. How about we use something like this? Okay. And again, I just kind of eyeball these things. I don't even, Yeah, that's good. That's good. Actually, I think I may make it just a tad shorter. You don't want to stress yourself. You really just don't want to have to stress yourself. Life is stressful enough without having to worry about stress when you're crafting, right? Okay, there we go. That's a little bit wider than I want, so I'm gonna trim it off a little bit. I'm gonna trim it all the way down to the edge of that blue label there. Okay. There we go. All right, that's better. And I'm gonna trim some off of the bottom because it's just a little bit longer than I like. And really, truly, this is half the fun. Trimming these papers down like that. There we go. Okay, now we've got some different pieces there. All right, but trimming these down, to be honest with you, that's half the fun. Okay, let's start cutting and see what we have. I'm only going to do the one side, but you can do both sides at the same time, or you can leave the back side blank. Entirely up to you. It really depends on how you're going to use it. If you're going to tuck the back piece of this into a pocket, then you can just leave that blank if you want, because that'll make it easier to slip in and out of the pocket. If, on the other hand, you're going to use both sides, then you're probably going to want to cut more pieces to go on the other side. And again, don't measure anything. Don't sweat it. I have extra pieces over here that I can cut and use for the other side anytime I'm ready. But for expediency's sake, I'm just going to go ahead and do the one side for you. The important part was what I showed you at first, which is how to get the paper clip in there and get it hidden. I was so frustrated with that process. It took me forever to figure out how people were doing this. And I finally found a great video, and I'll have to link it in the description if I can remember which one it was. Okay. But it was very well done, and I really liked it a lot. Okay. So there we go. And you're probably thinking, Carrie, what's going on here? You got too much going on. Maybe so. Maybe I'll just throw in a skinny piece of green paper. Here's a piece of green paper. Cut me a skinny piece. You may already have skinny scraps. Use them up. Use whatever you got. That's the best part about this whole project, is you can actually use up scraps. Stuff you have laying around the house. Okay, that's good. That's good. I have lots of scraps from projects, and that's what I do. I use the scraps up. Okay, let's ink this puppy. We've already inked both sides, so now all we have to do is ink the pieces themselves. Like I said, this takes the longest out of all of it, especially if you don't have a juicy pad. It really puts a lot of ink on your pages. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my walnut stain and use that on the other two. The reason on the other two, and then I'll use the vintage photo on this solid piece. The reason why I'm doing that is because these are a little bit darker. This color, I should say, is a little bit darker. And I want to make absolutely sure that I have enough contrast between these patterns. You can use all these patterns together, just like I'm doing here. You may not like it being quite so busy, and that's fine. You can use papers that are less busy. You can mix patterns with solids the way I'm doing. Entirely up to you how you do it. But you see it's a little bit more well-defined against that other piece. And that's what I want. I want some definition there, and that's why I ink the edges. Do you have to do that? No. Do you have to do it with Distress ink? No. You can use the oxide inks. You can pretty much use any ink that you can get on a little pad like this. Or you can even use one of those sponge brushes if you're real gentle with it. That'll work too. Okay. Those are inked. Now I'm going to go back to the vintage photo, and I'm going to ink the green piece because it will ink up dark enough. I just want a little bit of ink on the edges to just kind of provide some definition, and it gives it allows the eye to focus on each individual banner that you put on these things. I have some clusters that have 5 or 6 banners on them, and the great thing about that is when you ink the edges, it provides just enough definition so that you can see them all, which is great. Okay, sorry about that noise. A TG gun here. Okay, I'm hoping I don't lose a light here in a minute. My little Bluetooth speaker that I use to plug in my ring light is blinking at me, and I'm just hoping it doesn't think that I quit listening or I'm not using it, so it'll go off. I'm hoping it won't. Because if it goes off, there we go, hit the button, everything's okay. If it goes off, I lose my ring light, and that could really be awkward for both of us. Okay, this is the side I want to use, so I'm gonna flip it over. But Tim Holtz paper, you want to make absolutely sure before you ink it that you flip the paper over and check the other side, because I've actually done that. I've actually inked over one side and then decided I wanted to use another one. And I mean, if you waste ink, you waste ink. It's not a big deal, but still, it just saves you a little bit of time and a little bit of effort. Okay, that's crooked. You see that? Great thing about tape guns is you can gently pull this up. Okay, so let's do it this way. This is my go-to method for doing it this way so that I get it even on all the sides. On all the sides. Oops. I was about to do the same thing again, guys. Okay, there we go. There we go. All right. There's a little bit of ink left on here. Again, ink. There I go again with the ink. There's a little bit of glue left on the back there, so I'm just going to go ahead and rub that off so it doesn't stick to the page when I go to put it in something. There we go. All right. All right, let's use this next piece. Apply that. And again, I'm just applying glue, tape glue on the edges, on both edges, the top, and then I usually go at an angle. Wait a minute, I think I want to put the green one down first. Let me see. I kind of didn't want to lose her, but you know what? It kind of looks like I'm going to lose her. So let's put the green one down first. Again, it's your banner cluster, as Tim Holtz says. You do you. Okay. Yeah, I'm actually going to switch this around. And I am going to lose a little bit of her, but I'm okay with that. All right, let's flip this around again so I can line this up. Line it up with the top. Line it up with the other banner. And there we go. Okay. That's our banner cluster. Now, we can do a couple of things here. We can add this if we want to. I kind of like that, so I may add that a little bit later on. But the point is, you now have a nice big banner cluster. That doesn't look even to me, but I think it is. You have a nice big banner cluster that you can slip over a page. Let me bring this in here. To be honest with you, I left the other side blank so it would be easier to get it on the page so you can see it, what it looks like on the page. And just slide it down. This is really thin cardstock, so but you can slide it down. You can leave it up like that, or you can push it down all the way. It'll go down all the way. But isn't that cool? Doesn't that make a great bookmark? It makes a great card. Like I said, I have a card here. You can even slip it over the top of the card if you want to send it as a bookmark. So you can do it that way too, and just put the sentiment down below where the banner hits. You know, in other words, you'd put the sentiment down here. So that way they can remove this, and then just leave them a little note inside the card that explains how to remove the banner cluster. And there you go. After I've made a colossal mess. So there you have it, banner clusters. We have banner clusters that fold over pages. We have banner clusters that lay flat. Make as many of them as you want. What I do when I assembly line them, like I said before, is I cut all the rectangles first and lay them on top of each other, very much like you saw me do earlier. And then I go through each individual cluster stack, and I cut the little divots out of them, and then I go back and ink each individual stack, and then I glue them all down. Like I said, it kind of feels like I'm getting more done because I have more that are finished at one time. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, be sure to give me a thumbs up. Also give me, push the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss a video. Again, this is Carrie with Wandering Angel Studio. Take care and have a great day.